App Hub subscription, which if you're in the DreamSpark program, I think there's no annual fee for that. Now, if you want to have a game that has integration with Xbox Live, including achievements, your friends, the ability to do turn-by-turn game requests right through the Xbox Live system on the phone, that's a separate arrangement that you would need to make with the Xbox Live team. That sort of arrangement is usually reserved for companies that have a couple of solid games under their belt or are working with an existing publisher that already has that arrangement with the Xbox Live team. And that being said, it's not off limits for anybody because if you get a couple of games in market and they're pretty neat and you can show a great reason to integrate with the Xbox Live services, you could get in touch with Edwin and he could put you in touch with the Xbox Live team. Outside of that, we see people that are setting up their own services to track this, for scores. A popular game that's across all three platforms that I like to play is Words by Post. I don't know if you guys know that one, but that has a separate game tag system and a separate score system and a separate turn-by-turn system that exists outside of Xbox Live. That's totally fine. That developer created it from scratch, and it supports all three of the platforms that his game runs on, which is iPhone, Android, and Windows Phone. So that's what most people are doing, if they don't have an agreement with the Xbox Live team.
Cool. One more question, yeah?
A big problem with Android was the backwards compatibility and with the fragmentation. Can you talk about how you develop for different phones over time and how the hardware integration works with that?
So yeah, there's a fragmentation in Android marketplace. Can you talk about building apps or games for this phone moving forward with all the other devices coming out?
Sure. There's two main concepts when you're talking about fragmentation. One is the actual devices themselves. They have all kinds of different screen resolutions. They might have different kinds of controls. And the other one would be the core version of the OS that's running on the device. One of the great things about Windows Phone is that it's the same operating system on all of the phones. So when you write a game for Windows Phone 7, it's going to run on pretty much every single device. Now, the one caveat for that is that there are additional markets coming out where there's going to be some devices that have lower memory stipulations. With those lower memory stipulations, there are a few things that you would have in a full Windows Phone app that you wouldn't be able to have on those devices, such as background tasks and that type of thing. But for the most part, the XNA games that you write are going to translate across all the different devices that are out there. They're all touchscreen, they're all 800 by 480, they all have an accelerometer, they all have a GPS. So, that's a really common platform for you to be able to target. And it just makes it much easier when you're writing games, or any kind of app, really.
Okay. One more question, we'll let Glenn move on a bit. Yep.
So we talked about advertising, but what kind of support, what's the policy on in-app purchases?
So we've been talking about monetization stuff. What's the support for in-app purchases?
Right.
Or policy, yep.
We don't have an existing framework. I believe that's on the roadmap. Again, I can't really speak for the Windows Phone team and where they're going with that. Currently there are providers that, like Amazon, for example, when you buy a book, you want to read it through Kindle. There's the Kindle app on Windows Phone, so you're able to do that. We don't have plumbing in place on our side for an in-app purchase, or you're able to, if you want to set up your own plumbing to do that, that's fine.
Okay, keep going, Glenn.
Okay. So the other approach that I'm going to show you for writing Windows Phone games or Windows Phone apps is something called PhoneGap. And this is a great platform for cross-platform compatibility. PhoneGap allows you to write an application in HTML5, use a lot of the HTML5 things you already know about, like geolocation and IndexedDB and Canvas, that sort of thing. It allows you to use lots of JavaScript libraries like jQuery and tons of others that, as long as they're pure JavaScript implementations, will be able to work. And then you package up your code, your HTML5 app, inside of a host container for deployment to that multiple platform. And we've recently announced, and they've come out with, PhoneGap for the Windows Phone. Now, it's actually part of this project called, what do they call it now? I forget what they call it. Cordova, sorry, Project Cordova. And PhoneGap is an implementation of that. It's a great way to get started if your skills are in HTML5 and JavaScript. However, because it is still running as if it's in a browser, there are a couple of quirky little UI limitations that I'm going to show you as we go through it. But in essence, what you do is you go and you download this runtime, you add it to Visual Studio, which is what we were using earlier. You're able to create HTML5 applications and have them hosted in a Windows Phone app. So the way you would create it would be, once it's installed on your system, we would do File, New Project. We would pick the template for PhoneGap, so I'm just going to search my templates. This one's called Cordova Starter 3, so I'll hit OK. And it's going to get a project that has a hosting page for my application, and then a whole www folder that has all the actual files of my application. So in this case, if I pulled up index.html, you see I've had this text at the top that says Hello Cordova, and I've got this other thing at the bottom. I've got this div down here. I've got a style sheet with a bunch of styles inside there. And I've got this Cordova JavaScript file. And this handles the interaction between the JavaScript that's called from the index.html and the underlying runtime for Cordova, which is called gaplib, and that's up here. Those are all included in the template. So now what I would do is I would simply open my HTML file and I would start adding my HTML and my JavaScript. Here I can create additional folders. I can add a new folder if I wanted and put JavaScript files or images in there, and then I can write my code this way. From here, I can also reach into the local file system and do something. I can reach out to the internet and pull some data down. I can have various controls on the screen, buttons and labels and text boxes and so on. So if I were to run this now, you essentially would see a Windows Phone application come up. Let me rotate it back. You'll see a Windows Phone application come up, and it'll be a blank screen until this HTML takes over. This is the splash screen right here. And then here's the HTML coming over. And now we also have this message, Cordova is ready. And let's look and see where that came from. If I look in the source from my HTML5 page, you'll see I've got a little script here. So the script is referencing, first of all, the Cordova.js file. And then secondly, the script is adding an event handler for device ready, and that's when all the scripts have parsed and loaded. And then on device ready, we're doing two things. We're writing out to this div that Cordova is ready, and then we're getting window.device.cordova, and that's going to give us the version. And then secondly, we're using a little debugging here, which allows us to do some console logging, and that output was right down. Whoops, scroll too far. That log is right down here. Okay, so it would be at this point that you would then expand on this project, and you would build additional capabilities for your code in HTML and JavaScript. I'm going to open up the test project, the example project that comes with this PhoneGap library. And notice this has a slightly more complex www folder. And they've got examples in here for interacting with contacts, the compass if your phone has one, the camera, audio things like playing music, location services, your network, those are all found in here. So if I were to run this, I'd see my HTML5 app loading, running within my phone app here. And I could go, for example, to accelerometer. And now in my emulator, I'm going to open up the accelerometer. And right now I'm going to get the position, which is 0, almost 0, and 0. So now if I take this and rotate it, and I do get acceleration, you see I get different numbers. So this is the HTML5 code interacting with the underlying Windows Phone application that's being hosted in. I can do things like location, I can do the camera, capture an image, I can test your network connection, I could go after contacts, talk to the file system, do location, do notifications if I want, do some local storage. So there's a wide variety of things you can do. Now this code that you're seeing would run pretty much unchanged if this were PhoneGap for iOS and or PhoneGap for Android. And that's really a great starting point.